Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for such a presentation. It's true that I have sort of tradition to speak about Europe because I have had the opportunity since '99 to work with 38 now different presidencies, so it's quite a lot. And I took the floor 2 times for the presidency of the ECOFIN and for the Eurogroup. I'm very pleased to see also a former president of the Eurogroup in the room. And so, of course, we received many questions about the future of Europe, and it's not new to speak about the future of Europe, but now it's maybe time to do more. And I must say that I discuss sometimes on such an issue with many students or many young people in Belgium. We receive many people from the different regions all the time in the Egmont Palace, not so far from here. And they ask about different kind of questions, but in the last discussion I was quite surprised to listen about some question about how it's possible for Europe to stand vis-à-vis other big powers. Could Europe protect us from a third world war? Asked one student recently. And a few weeks ago, talking at the Brussels days, a participant who remembered Brussels in 1945 made an angry comment at the end of my presentation, and he said, I had not mentioned that Europe was the guarantee for peace and that not so long ago this continent was at war. But in fact, one question came back on all those occasions, independently of the age of the participants. What are the values that Europe stands for today? And I believe that it's maybe a way to explain the expectations of many citizens in Europe, the reference to the values. And if I may, I will give you maybe 3 ways to try to organize the answer to the question of the values. The first one, of course, is to stick to our values. The second one is to bring concrete results for the citizens in different fields. And the third one is to make the European Union a real global player. And to start, I will say some words about what are the values we stand for and how do we defend them. Being a member of the European Union is not just a geographical fact, but it's a political choice. It implies, among other aspects, the full respect for fundamental rights and for the principles of the rule of law. There are many definitions of the rule of law, but it's important to repeat that we need to follow those principles in the organization of all different states and at the different levels, not only at the states level, but in the regions, in the municipalities, and in many other organizations. But the debates we have seen around legislation some years ago in Hungary, the current situation in Poland, or issues arising around anti-terror legislations, to quote only 3 examples, demonstrated it's a difficult topic to discuss among us at the ministerial level about the values. And those discussions are often decisive but also divisive, and demonstrate that the European Union might not have all the necessary tools to react to those challenges. And so I'm sure that we need to organize the same process, to have a real peer review in the European Union about the rule of law, like we have about the economic criteria and about the Maastricht criteria. And with Jeroen Dijsselbloem in the room, I must say that in the Eurogroup, in the ECOFIN, and then in the European Council, we have all the time discussions about the different budgets, the different economic reforms in all the member states. And we are, year after year, discussing euro by euro the situation in all the member states. But when we have the same discussions about the Copenhagen criteria, the political criteria, it's just possible to do that before the accession. We control, year after year, if there are some progresses in the candidate countries about the rule of law. But after the accession, we don't have the same mechanism than for the economic situation. And we are waiting for a real crisis, I said, in Hungary or now in Poland, to discuss on that. And with a real unique tool, the Article 7 of the treaties, and of course with difficult discussions, and we will see that in the near future about Poland, in the Council about that. So why not the same kind of organization for the political evolution in Europe? And I've proposed 2 years ago to organize a peer review at the level of the General Affairs Council with the same kind of analysis and the same kind of recommendations than for the Maastricht criteria. We have many discussions on that in the United Nations, in the Human Rights Council in Geneva, or in the Council of Europe, but not in the European Union. And it's very strange because we are very proud to discuss about the human rights everywhere in the world. We are going to many continents explaining that we are the continent with a real application of the rule of law, and we don't discuss about that among us. So the first element, I want to insist on that, is to repeat that the European Union is a European fund on the values, and that we need to organize a real process inside the European Union to discuss on that, and not just about one member state, but about all. And to be concrete, in the Western countries also, like in Belgium, like maybe in others, it's important to verify what kind of balance we have organized between the measures to protect the security of the people, give an example after the terrorist attacks, and the defense of the fundamental rights at the individual level for all the citizens. And I'm sure that it's a very interesting debate, not only for the European Union, I repeat, but also for the way to explain our position out of the European Union. It's the first point, to go back to the value. The second point is to deliver. And we need to come with concrete results. We have seen difficult elections in many countries with real progress for some populist parties on both sides, on left side or right side. And at the end, we were quite satisfied to see the emergence of more moderate government. I mean, in the Netherlands, in France, in Germany, maybe in others in the next weeks, we will see. I know that I've listened to the comments of the President of the Commission about the election in March in Italy. But of course, now, if we want to don't have another surprise during the next elections, we need to deliver. And we need to deliver on concrete issues, not with some change in the treaties, not with many institutional discussions, but to deliver, first of all, in the completion of the internal market. Is it possible to do more? 25 years after the beginning of the internal market, it's maybe important to see how it's possible to go further on that, and maybe to have some discussions about the banking union and other some technical aspects, if I may, in the economic and monetary union, but also a real fiscal policy together, a real social policy together, with 28 member states, maybe 27 after the Brexit, or if it's needed, with a differentiation and with a capacity for the Eurogroup to go further without any break coming from other member states. We will see. But it's quite important to do that, so the internal market and the capacity to do more in the economic and monetary union, and certainly on fiscal side and in the social policy. And we will see. Of course, I know that there's a question for the audience maybe today, but I've asked since many years to decide at the European level with qualified majority. And now I'm quite sure everybody has said during many years is due to UK. UK asked unanimity. So after the Brexit, I'm sure that it will be easy. No, you are not sure. But normally it must be easy to go to qualified majority for all. We will see. I may be too confident, but I have seen that there are maybe some people letting UK explaining that without any comment. So first that, maybe the same, we need also to explain that we have an open economy in Europe. Of course, it's important to protect our economy against some form of dumpings coming from different parts of the world, but we need to stay with an open economy. So it's very important also to try to discuss about the evolution on the international trade and to have a more balanced approach. There are some legitimate concerns about the trade, what kind of social policy, environmental policy, defense of human rights in many places in the world, and we have had huge discussions in Belgium, to give an example, about the CETA. It was a very complex discussion to go to an agreement on that. But it's important also to protect our standards, but to stay with an open economy. And of course, there are a lot of things to do, again, in the way to improve a better economic and monetary union. But it's not just in the economic field. We need to do more in security and defense. We have started with the PESCO. It's a first good start, but now we need to go to a real integration of our security and defense policy. And to do that, it's important to make some progress in the industrial policy about defense. Without a real European industrial policy like in the civil aviation with Airbus or like in the space with our European agency, it will be difficult to have a more integrated defense policy. But it's time to have a real pillar from the European Union in the NATO and to go further on that. It's a difficult issue, like the foreign affairs policy. I will come back on that. But maybe one word also about migration to explain it. We need to go further in a real European policy about migration, external one, but also internal one, about the asylum process. And I'm sure that without that, if we are not able to deliver on those different issues, it will be difficult to convince the citizens that there is a real European dream. We don't have, for the moment, a real dream for the European citizens. And so, again, go back to the values and try to deliver on some specific element with all the member states, if it's possible, with some, if it's needed. And I'm sure that the different dimensions of the European Union will become to be a reality more and more, but it's the case now. We are not all in the Eurozone, we are not all in Schengen, we are not all in the NATO, so it's not real different. And the third element I said, it's also very important for the European Union to become to be a real global player. We are in trade, we are in the financing of development aid, we are maybe the first global player in some issues, but we are not all the time at the table with a real strong foreign policy coming from the European Union due to different reasons, but due, first of all, to the lack of capacity to express with one and only one voice our position outside of the European Union. And again, to do that, first, we need to organize a better functioning and a better delegation, in fact, to the European External Action Services, and so to the real Minister of Foreign Affairs at the European level, now Federica Mogherini. I mean, maybe with a qualified majority, it will be easier to discuss on that, but we need to organize a real representation outside of the European Union with one voice for all the member states. To give an example about the JCPOA, so the nuclear agreement with Iran, the main role was played by Europe, by Cathy Ashton, organizing with all the partners the negotiation with Iran. It was possible to let Cathy Ashton doing the job. Why not in other fields? So the first element is that, to have the capacity to speak with one voice about the climate change, about many other issues at the international level. I said to do that, of course, and to be at the table, and certainly when we are speaking about peace processes in Syria, in Iraq, but maybe also in the Middle East, we need to have a real defense and security policy. And so the PESCO is one of the tools to be able to play a global role at the international level. And so we need to make some new progresses. Just to give a small example, it's possible for Belgium and the Netherlands to have only one navy together. Small example, but why not more and more such a kind of integration between different partners, not to have a European army, certainly not for the moment, but to have a better integration and at the end to have the capacity to use such a role in the external world. Third element, diplomacy, of course, defense, but also the way to take part in the development process in many parts of the world, and there we have real efficiency. I said the European Union is maybe the first donor and the first contributor for development aid in the world, but how it's possible to concentrate it. And in the end, to have a comprehensive approach with diplomacy, defense, and development, the 3 Ds, in different parts of the world. We have started to do that. To give an example, the Sahel. There are some meetings today in Brussels about the Sahel with the G5. there it's possible for the European Union to play a role because we have such a comprehensive approach with a military presence, with a real action on development, but also with the capacity to support and to sustain a political process in the different countries in the region and in the Sahel in general. And of course, again, we need to be open to discuss about some important issues at the worldwide level. And Belgium, to give an example, for the moment is candidate for a non-permanent seat in the Security Council in 19 and 20. And we try to explain, of course, we don't have a national agenda. We are just there to act for peace and to come with a capacity to force some consensus. You know that in Belgium, we are well known for our capacity to organize compromises, sometimes after a long period of time. But I've seen that now in the Netherlands, in Germany, there are also some times needed to discuss about the coalition, so we have the tradition to do that. We are doing that as a founding member since the beginning in the European Union, so why not at the international level? But that means that we need also to explain that the security issues is not just armed conflict. The European Union has played a role to explain that climate change, it's also a real risk for the security in the world with so many displaced people due to the climate change. The poverty, of course, and so the development, SDGs at the worldwide level, and the European Union has a role to play to promote the SDGs. The migration issue. But to say something about the global compact at the international level, we need to solve all difficulties about the migration issue. We have made some progresses for the external policy, a control of the external borders, more development aid in many countries of origin for the migrants. We try to solve some conflicts in the world and so on and so forth, but how it's possible to share the responsibility and solidarity with the refugees on the European continent. It's a huge debate. We don't have exactly the same meaning everywhere in Europe, but it's very important for all the citizens to prove that it's possible to start it. And so I want to conclude saying that it's possible to do better at the European level, maybe also with a better communication on two elements. First, I've seen that in so many countries, it's very easy for a lot of members of different governments to explain that the problem is the bureaucracy in Brussels. And all the difficulties are coming from Brussels. And of course, if there's a good decision in the European Union, it's a national one. If there's a difficult decision to explain, it's Brussels. I have said since many years to many colleagues that to me it's difficult to say that because all the decisions are taken in Brussels to me, or in the national government, or at the European level. So please, is it possible to assume the role of all the deciders at the European level and not to try to split all the discussions with a positive side is the national one and a negative side is Brussels. And that is maybe not for the populist parties, it's for everybody. And first of all, for, again, the members of the different governments. If you organize a national briefing after a meeting, please don't split the results with a positive side due to your national policy and a negative one due just to Brussels. The second element, again, is to go back to the values, to try to organize our process, explaining certainly to the young generations that the European Union is a process on the basis of values, and I've said to explain that we need to control the implementation of those values in all the member states. Please also organize a process with a real capacity to deliver in concrete issues, or it's possible to solve some issues where there is a real interest in the population. Climate change, migration, security, foreign affairs. We have received in the last days so many questions about Syria. How it's possible to do something in Syria. Belgium tried to do the best, but it's maybe better to try to do that with all the member states of the European Union. And again, in such a way to have real progresses in some fields, it will be possible to play a role as a global player. If we are not doing that, we'll have, I'm sure, many problems in the next round of elections in a lot of our member states. So thank you very much for such an opportunity to express some ideas about the future of Europe, but I'm sure that we need to be very concrete. We need to organize such a capacity to protect the values. We need to deliver on some issues, and we need to try to play a real role as a global player in the world. Thank you.